This video is not really going to be an analysis of yesterday's game, because sure, I want to talk to Ottawa Senators fans in this video, and I want to talk to Canadiens fans as well, but the conversation I want to have doesn't really revolve around yesterday's game too much, because what I wanted to talk about instead was a pretty polarizing player whose name has gone out there and really put an exclamation point beside it in the minds of many Ottawa Senators and heck, even Toronto Maple Leafs fans. Today we're talking about Montreal Canadiens prospect Arber Xhekaj, and not necessarily how good or how bad he's been, but I wanted to talk about the impact that he has had on other teams and other team fan bases, because the Montreal Canadiens fan base, they love this guy. Take a look at the profile for Xhekaj. He's 21 years old, 6'4", 238 as a left-handed defenseman, undrafted but signed by the Montreal Canadiens as a free agent from the OHL a few years ago. He played for the Kitchener Rangers and for the Hamilton Bulldogs, and last season, heading into what was his final OHL season, he actually showed off really well in both the Canadiens prospect tournaments and in the preseason. I remember watching even last year's games and saying, yeah, no, that guy with the weird last name is pretty good. And especially after the season he had previously, wherein he was a point-per-game defenseman with Kitchener and a point-per-game defenseman for Hamilton in the playoffs, you had yourselves a profile for Xhekaj that was a lot more physically mature, that was a lot more poised and polished heading into the 22-23 season, and now all of a sudden you have yourselves a player who, playing in the Prospects Tournament in 2022 and in the preseason, is putting such a big stamp on the map that he might actually make the Montreal Canadiens. Xhekaj is big, he's very physical, he's not afraid to try and get under the opponent's skin, and he's been one of the more in-your-face impact players that the Canadiens have iced in prospect games and in preseason games. Not to mention the fact that Xhekaj is honestly pretty alright defensively. And if he did make the Montreal Canadiens lineup for 22-23, he wouldn't necessarily be the worst option out there. Sure, he might not be the best, especially since he's only 21 and he's been playing in the OHL this entire time, but he's not bad. To cement the point home, this is what Elliotte Friedman also said: Montreal might have a real steal here. There were a number of teams I was just checking in with today, and they were kind of like, I wish we found him first, he says about Xhekaj. This is from like a week ago, by the way, so it's been kind of growing, the hype train for Arber Xhekaj the past few days over here. He definitely could use some more development time and maybe even just a bit more refining in the AHL before becoming a full-time NHL defenseman, but that's neither here nor there. The problem with Arber Xhekaj, and probably the reason why this is even a conversational topic, is because when it comes to Maple Leafs fans and Senators fans, if you take a look onto social media and see what a lot of these people have to say about Xhekaj, there's one thing that they all have in common. They absolutely hate the guy's guts. Now, there's a reason for that. I don't want to make it seem like he's completely innocent here, but it's really interesting to me, just going through the Senators fans pages that I follow, the Leafs fans that pop up on my timeline once in a while, and searching the keyword Xhekaj on social media and seeing what they have to say. I'm not going to showcase any of the tweets that I've seen in this video because, like, you know, there are some things where it's like, oh, look, my tweet is in a Lego Rocks 99 video, and that happens a few times. I get DMs from people whose material I include in the videos. But other times, if it's something like this, I don't really know if people would be too open to wanting that to be showcased in front of an audience of 30,000 people. But either way, you're just going to have to believe me on this one. Sens fans, Leafs fans, they hate the guy's guts, and they don't want him to succeed. Why is that, though? Well, if you go over to the parts of Xhekaj that make him stand out more than other Canadiens defensemen, it's the fact that he is absolutely unrelenting in the defensive zone when other players are physically getting involved. If there's a battle in front of the crease, Xhekaj is in there just really going at guys and making their lives difficult. And I will say that Xhekaj kind of does need to reel himself in a little bit more. Like, obviously, you know, he's fresh out of the OHL, so he's not going to be a perfect pro hockey player just yet, but he does kind of do it a bit too much, to the point where guys get hurt. And if you go over to the Senators in particular, this is where the Sens' hate for Xhekaj comes into play. Here's a comment from the Canadian subreddit that goes over the history of Xhekaj. Well, he did injure Angus Crookshank last year. knocked him out the entire season. This year, he gave Ostapchuk a concussion. He injured Logan and knocked out another undrafted defenseman that was on an amateur tryout contract. Logan, Cruikshank, and Ostapchuk are all really good prospects who are expected to tear up their league, so it's not like it's happened once. I've said it before, I'm a Sens fan, Keys A says. But Xhekaj's work ethic is something I admire, and I hope he cracks Montreal's roster. I actually really like him. Sorry, our fan base is ripping him to shreds due to just being salty. I hope he has a great game tonight. This comment was made yesterday before the Canadiens and Sens game, wherein Xhekaj was playing. I hope he lays some big hits that don't injure anyone, and I feel like the rivalry is heating up a little bit, and it's nice. Good luck tonight. And so if you go over to what actually happened in the game, I know I said this is not going to be a recap video, but there were some interesting parts of last night's Sens and Canadiens game that do relate to this conversation. Arber Xhekaj did get into a fight, and it's with a player he's a little familiar with. Mark Kastelic was indeed the guy that decided to tango and drop the gloves with Mr. Xhekaj himself. They actually fought as well a year ago in the Prospects tournament, I believe. And the response on social media to this was, okay, yeah, look, amazing. A guy standing up for his team, standing up against the big bad bully in Xhekaj who's going out there and injuring people, and even Toronto fans were going out there jumping on the train to really just show their support for the Senators player in this fight against Xhekaj. Now, why does Toronto have a stake in the race here? Well, because yesterday, Arber Xhekaj was kind of getting into it a little bit with Michael Bunting. As we said, net front battles, plays where Xhekaj is in his own zone, fighting it out with players in front of his goalie. He and Bunting were kind of going at it a little bit, and you had yourselves the goal that was eventually scored by William Nylander, where Michael Bunting made the cross-crease pass, and you could see Bunting kind of give a little bit of a shove to Xhekaj after the goal was scored, taunting the guy as if it was like, yeah, screw you, man. Like, you tried so hard pushing me out of this crease here. I didn't like that the first time. I still don't like it. But guess what? We scored. So take that in your face, bud. And just the overall level of acrimony is crazy to me. Like, it's wild that a guy that hasn't even played a full regular season NHL game yet has garnered so much attention from Sens and Leafs fans. Like, the Eastern Canadian hockey scene in the NHL is being dominated by conversations about this one guy. Like, the amount of, oh, I hope he makes the Canadiens so Brady Tkachuk can go out there and knock him out. Like, the comments I've seen are ridiculous. Like, just throwing that out there, I've never seen so much attention given to an undrafted CHL free agent who is playing in his second NHL training camp with the Canadiens. Like, that's crazy to me. Crazy. So, whatever happens in the next few days, few months, few years even of Xhekaj in his NHL career, because I have no doubt he's probably going to make the Canadiens someday, whether or not that's today or sometime next season after playing a year in Laval. Honestly, I feel like a Laval season could really, like, you talk about guys being tough already. The AHL is a lot more adjusted for physical altercations and fights, and it's a lot less of a skill league than the NHL is. So a guy like Arber Xhekaj, you take what he is already, an absolute monster of a human being that is not afraid to go out there and just hurt people. Probably in an irresponsible way. You want to really see him hold it back so that he doesn't injure people constantly like he did earlier. But if you throw that guy into the AHL, you're throwing him in with the wolves, the other beasts of human beings that are not afraid to go out there and hurt people. And if he goes out there and he comes out on top next season, let's say 2023, 2024, he makes the Canadiens, like, I hate to say it, but he might even be able to unlock an even more deadly side of his physicality. Like, of course, hopefully he gets it under control and he doesn't really hurt people, but if you want to go out there and talk about a guy on the Canadiens that could just make life a living hell for the opponent, I mean, we had a few of them already. Ben Sherratt was here. You could argue Shea Weber. Corey Perry was here as well. Gallagher already exists on this team. So Montreal could be looking at a pretty feisty future, I guess. That's the best word to use, I feel. Feisty. Yeah, especially when you talk about the Senators and Leafs fans talking about this guy. Oh yeah, it's very feisty. Talk in the comments though either way all your thoughts about Arber Xhekaj. If you're a Maple Leafs fan, a Canadiens fan, or a Senators fan, what are your thoughts on what you've seen so far out of the 21-year-old big left-handed defenseman? Do you think he makes the Canadiens? Do you want him to make the Canadiens? And where do you see his career heading down the next few seasons? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Juraj, and bye.